Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Traumplicity Talk Show with your host, Dr. Amanda Helman, author, breakthrough coach, and speaker. Traumplicity is trauma plus simplicity. You might think, why do they go together? Well, we have trauma, and our brain really responds well to simple steps to healing trauma on the journey. We know that trauma is a process, there can be complexities, but our simple steps will lead us there. Unfortunately, we have had, and even today, have amazing guests like Danielle, who I'll introduce in just a moment. And our guests share about how they navigated an aspect of trauma. They share tips and then a word of encouragement for you wherever you are on the journey. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. As I mentioned, tonight's guest is Danielle Smason, and she is a foundational trauma practitioner. Danielle focuses on the moments you forget about, the ones that are affecting you in ways you don't even realize. Danielle is a proud wife and mom of 2 boys. She loves giving back to others and being a voice for the underdog. Danielle is on a mission to save 1 million lives. From a young age, Danielle was always intuitive. She always knew she had a gift. After struggling with her own health issues for years and unexpectedly getting pregnant, she was led to her purpose to teach people how to build their emotional foundations so they could truly mend their relationships and have answers to their health struggles. Danielle works with your soul to figure out why you can't fully move forward and why you haven't been able to release your emotional pain. Danielle is here to show you how to work with your triggering memories and strained relationships you've been suppressing or think you've mended, so you can finally create an easeful life. So Danielle, it's wonderful to have you here on our podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, and I do a lot of our work really overlaps, so I'm really excited to hear more about your story. And with that said, would love to hear your story, your specific story that you want to share. I know there might be more, but that specific piece of your trauma story.
Yeah, absolutely. The piece that I really want to share today is that my trauma wasn't like the trauma that I felt I was surrounded by. Therefore, I didn't even know I had trauma. No one knew I had trauma because I grew up in a home that was super loving. And it was almost to the point where there was too much love, there was too much belief in me that as I got older, I had to learn that not everyone believed in me like my parents believed in me. And it really was, for me, I felt safe inside the home. But when I was outside the home, I didn't feel as safe because I really wasn't trusting myself. I wasn't really able to express myself of what I really felt inside. And the reason that I'm really sharing this is because with people that are listening that may feel like they haven't gone through trauma, there's still trauma because it's the effect, the physiological effect on the body. And that's what trauma is. It's not the trauma itself, it's the physiological effect that's happening in the body now. And it's going to continue to happen until it's released.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And I love that you shared a different angle of trauma where, yes, you had that love, you had that support, but then that happened in your house. But then learning how to feel safe and how trauma can happen outside of our house, or perhaps even understanding different relationships or different events that may not have been happening there. So that's really, really amazing. And I also love that you shared about physiology, because there can be memories and there also can be the body's triggers, certainly. So I'd love for you to go a little bit more, if you're willing, into that. So you talked about suppression, which I use that word often, but talking about physiology of trauma, can you bring a little bit more out about that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I want to share with that is you have to realize that when something hasn't gone away in about 2 months, that's when something becomes chronic. And a lot of what I'm seeing in society now is a lot of people are being labeled with certain diseases, certain diagnoses. And if you're someone on here and you connect to that diagnosis and that makes you feel safe and that's what you feel comfortable with, then by all means, take on that label. But for the people that I work with, it's really hard for them to accept that that's their diagnosis, that that's what's really going on. And when you really learn how the body responded in those moments, that's when you're able to really get to the root, not even the root, but the seeds of what's really going on. And so what I mean by physiological is, right, it's happening in the body, and the body knows everything. There are things the body knows that your mind can't even begin to comprehend, it couldn't even remember. And so when you're able to have someone take you to that place inside of yourself to really connect with yourself and what your body has known all along, and to give you that safe space to really find what's really going on, that's when those health struggles will start to dissipate. And it happens very quickly because we're all just made up of energy. And if we begin to really understand that and not look at ourselves as part by part, but as a whole, that's when we're really going to start to find those real answers, where we don't feel like we're just having surgery after surgery, or doing doctor after doctor, specialist after specialist, test after test. It's really getting to the root of what's really going on.
Yeah, and I love that. Getting to the roots for sure. And so I know that you mentioned your wife, you have 2 sons, and then you also shared about your unexpected pregnancy, so how did that impact you, which really led to your passions about trauma and perhaps that physiology of trauma?
Yeah. I was already in my purpose before I was pregnant,
Okay.
but when you get pregnant, you get unexpectedly pregnant, you don't feel like you have that foundation to really sit on top of and really build on top of. You really start to see the places in your life where you still need healing.
Mm.
And for me, I started to realize that even though I didn't have that built foundation of a normal foundation, of financial foundation, of, what people would think is a foundation, I had more of that emotional foundation. I had more of an understanding of myself, of an awareness of me. And I was able to give that to my children too, to be able to just be so aware of what was going on in the womb, to be so aware of what was going on when they came into the world. And I also had mishaps along the way of, my own stuff coming up and really having to work through that. And just getting pregnant when you least expect it, it does so much to you. It does so much to your emotions. It does so much to your body. And we all know that kids are here because they're meant to show us our greatest pains, the things that we think we've healed, but maybe we haven't healed. And where it's really led me to my full purpose is just, yes, I work with men, women, all kinds, but really also working with moms to really understand themselves so that they really can understand their children.
Mm. So I love that. I love how you shared a lot about even just that unexpected pregnancy, and even how it impacts your body, and even from the womb, which is true, and some of that pain that we don't even realize, or even just the emotions. But what I really loved as well is you sharing how children do uncover any of the wounds or even areas that we didn't realize still need to heal. That's really powerful and very true. Our children are very wise. They're very, very active and have just lots of wisdom. So I love that you shared that, Danielle. And so certainly anyone in the audience who is a mom and I know you shared that you work with moms, just really getting to know and get in touch with their emotions, and even having that process of understanding and unpacking what's happening. So thank you. And so our next part is really looking at strategies, 3 or 5 strategies that you perhaps have used to help you even through the process of healing trauma.
So as I kind of said on the form that we filled out together, I'm not really one that's big on strategies, just because I don't feel like that's what it really takes to work through trauma. But what I will say is it's really important. The number one strategy I would give someone is really understanding where they're actually at. And what I mean by that is getting so honest and so real with yourself about how you're actually showing up in your relationship with your significant other, how you're actually showing up in your relationship with your mom or your dad. Even if you are best friends with your mom now, that doesn't mean that's what the body's message is taking on, even if you are best friends. So it's really important to stop rationalizing how you really felt in those moments, because those are the moments that are really stopping people from moving forward. Those are the moments that are wreaking havoc on the body, or will wreak havoc on the body if they're not taken care of. So my biggest piece of advice really is for someone to get so aware of what's really bothering me. And the way that someone can just start to do that, especially with the work that I do, it's all based through your soul. So you've got to be able to connect to yourself. And if you're not able to, it's totally fine, because there's so many people out there. But I might be here just to give you an awareness. But for me, if you just close your eyes and you start to just notice your body, like sometimes we just forget to notice ourselves and notice that what is going on in our throat, what's going on in our chest. And you might not be able to fully explain it, but if you just start to notice that there is something going on, that's the first piece, is to admit there's something going on. And then the next piece of advice that I would give to somebody or tell someone to work towards is admitting to yourself that you might not know what's going on. Can be a really hard thing to do for a lot of people, because they want to figure out what's going on, what's going on, what's going on. But if you finally get to that point in your journey where you're like, I just want answers, and I'm willing to admit to myself, I don't know what's going on, that's that next piece. And then the piece after that is really to know that you have to reach out. You have to ask for help. You have to be willing to set aside what you think you know and really ask for help if you are someone that wants to be on the other side of your pain. It's really important. And the steps that I'm walking you through are the exact steps I had to walk myself through. I had to realize that there was an awareness, and it's not an awareness that you just do it today and then you come see me, or you come see Amanda, or you come see someone else and it's over with. It's an awareness that you're going to continue to build over and over and over again. And it just gets easier and easier and easier as you build that awareness.
Great. So a lot of strategic thinking, because there's strategy is really about the thought or the plan. So when you look, when you were sharing, Danielle, the first step was identifying how really, how am I feeling? How are things impacting? And that goes back to thinking, metacognition, which is thinking about our thinking. What am I thinking? How am I processing? And so that's a big component of even just thinking about context of the relationship, as you mentioned, and then looking at, well, what else is happening? And even that connection, mind-body connection that often, as Bessel van der Kolk shares, when the body keeps score, is that there's a way to connect it. And sometimes we aren't connected. And so that takes a process, right? So a lot of these things are even our thinking, and even ways to shift, as you shared, that you had certain steps or things that you did to help walk yourself through it. And then other people learn or glean from some of those things and move through that as well. So that's great. And thinking about the audience, right? There's going to be people who are maybe perhaps, Danielle, on the beginning part of this journey, or perhaps are moving through it, or perhaps they're just recognizing, as I always say, I'm probably writing a book about families, because I think there's always different types of traumas that happen. We're human. And so you really can't escape trauma, but we can actually help one another work through it. But when you're thinking about different people on the journey, what are some words of encouragement that you would want to share with them?
I think the words that I would want to share is, as long as you're committed, you're going to find that answer. It's just about really starting to, there is so much out there about trauma right now. There are
Mhm.
so many people. It's almost like, and I don't know if you feel this way, Amanda, but it's almost like it's a fad now. It's like everyone's talking about trauma. Everyone's saying they can help people with trauma. And I think the biggest thing with trauma is that trauma's deep.
Mhm.
And but the biggest thing I've learned with trauma is it doesn't have to be complicated to work through. It really doesn't. You know, what we explain about our method is that it's fast, it's reversible, and it's simple.
Mhm.
And I feel that it's just someone that's willing to really be open and to be honest with themselves. You can't hide from yourself anymore. And I think the encouragement that I would give to somebody is as long as you're committed to finding that answer, you will find it. But the most important thing is, because there is so much out there, you have to get to a place where you can listen to yourself just enough to say, okay, I feel safe with this person. I feel like this person has said something to me different than someone else has said to me. This feels like it could be really good for me, versus just feeling like you have to do something because you need an answer right now. It's really important to really check in with yourself when you're talking to someone about what is really right for you. And so the encouragement I would really give is just stay determined, stay committed, don't give up on yourself, don't give up on where you are in your journey, because I'm sure you have all different types of listeners. If you're in the beginning of your journey, you've never even stepped foot into this world, right? You just have to start. You just have to start. You have to just put one foot in front. Just take one step, even today, after listening to this podcast. Just take one step, whether it's that person that's been knocking at your door, whether it is that you connect with me, whether it is you connect with Amanda. Take that one step. And then if you're someone that's been on this journey for a long time and you haven't received any answers, it's almost like the one of my favorite people in the world, Ed Milet, talks about the power of one more. So it's that idea of give it that one more shot. That next person that you really connect to may be that answer that you've been looking for. It's not that they're your answer, but it's what's going to lead you to that answer. And then the other thing I would say is, if you're on this journey and you've tried things and they've worked, but they haven't fully stuck, then it's like, again, it's giving it just that one more shot. And when you do that, that is when you're going to reap the reward. That is when you're going to see things starting to change. But the biggest piece I would say is show up and be ready to do the work, because no one can hold your hand too much to the point where they can do the work for you. You have to be willing to do the work for yourself.
Thank you. So a lot of what you shared, Danielle, was not giving up, taking one step at a time, moving ahead. And yes, and again, there's such a vast range of traumas. So some complex are tough because you're going through it and it's a lot, versus, if you have acute and they all matter, but some are very deep, and do take longer to uproot the root, and certainly never giving up and having support, having the right safe people in place for sure. Like when you're saying to always have people, and really it is the hardest thing is going through the pain, because it is sometimes you're in it, and other people can walk with you to a certain point, and then there's certain parts you're walking through, and yet people be cheering you on. So I definitely agree, Danielle. And so certainly in a world where there is a lot of different types of traumas, so especially with pandemics and everything else that have exacerbated it, and we're at a time where trauma is at its ultimate peak, where people are actually sharing about it finally instead of being silent. It is a time where a lot of people are, I always say, all hands on deck, understanding what it is and how it impacts all of us in our generation. So certainly, Danielle, I really appreciated your input, your insights for all of the different ways that you've been getting to the roots of things. Certainly, audience, I will be putting her information on the podcast and even the YouTube, so you can get in touch with her. If you have any questions, I'll get them back to her. So certainly that won't be an issue. And certainly, as always, on the Traumplicity podcast, happens once a week. We're always looking at different people's stories, their journeys, and how to help you move forward. And always remember that you matter, you're loved, and you're valuable at all times, no matter what. So I can't wait to have you all tune in next week. Take care. And Danielle, thank you once again. It was great to talk with you tonight.
Thanks so much.